For more than 180 million years, reptiles became the dominant forms of life across the planet. During this vast span of time, dinosaurs rose from small and relatively simple ancestors to become the most successful land animals of their era. Giant predators hunted across ancient landscapes. Enormous plant eaters roamed forests and plains, and flying reptiles ruled the skies, while powerful marine reptiles occupied the oceans. At the same time, the world itself was constantly changing. From the beginning of the Triassic period to the end of the Cretaceous period, the Age of Reptiles was a time of dramatic change, remarkable evolution, and some of the most fascinating creatures ever to live on Earth. Before the dinosaurs appeared on Earth, the planet was already very old and had gone through many long stages of change. One of the most important of these stages was the end of the Paleozoic Era. This time covers a very long stretch of Earth history that ended in the period known as the Permian period. During this time, Earth had land, oceans, air, and living things that were very different from what would exist later. The land was joined into a very large single mass. This landmass contained most of the continents connected together. The oceans surrounded this large land area and also filled many internal seas. The climate across the planet changed greatly over time, and the conditions became more difficult for many living things near the end of this era. During the late part of the Paleozoic era, the arrangement of Earth's surface was very different from today. Most land was gathered into one large connected region. This created vast inland dry areas far from ocean influence. Many regions experienced strong seasonal changes, with long dry periods in some areas and wetter conditions in others. Large mountain systems existed, where parts of the land were pushed together over long periods. These processes changed the shape of the land and affected drainage patterns of rivers and lakes. Water flow systems shifted across long distances and created new environments for living organisms. The ocean margins also changed in shape and depth, affecting marine habitats. The atmosphere during this time contained oxygen levels that changed over long intervals. In earlier parts of the Paleozoic era, oxygen levels had risen significantly due to plant activity in wetlands and forests. By the late Paleozoic, oxygen levels began to fluctuate. These changes affected the ability of some organisms to survive in different environments. Carbon dioxide levels also shifted. These shifts influenced temperature patterns across the planet. Some regions experienced warmer conditions, while others became cooler and drier. These changes did not happen quickly in human terms, but occurred over long spans of geological time. Life on land during the end of the Paleozoic era included many types of organisms that no longer exist today. Forests were made of plants that reproduced using spores instead of seeds. Large tree-like plants grew in swampy regions where water was present for long periods. These plants contributed to the formation of thick layers of organic material in lowland areas. Over time, this material was buried and changed under pressure and heat conditions. In other regions, plants adapted to drier environments became more common. These included early seed-producing plants that could survive without constant water coverage. The distribution of plant life changed as climate conditions shifted. Animal life on land included early forms of vertebrates and many invertebrates. Amphibian species were widespread in areas with access to water. These animals depended on aquatic environments for parts of their life cycles. Insects were already present in large numbers and had diversified into many forms. Some insects reached very large sizes compared to modern species. The availability of oxygen in the atmosphere supported their growth and survival in different ecological niches. Spiders and related organisms also existed in terrestrial environments and played roles in food chains. Early reptiles began to appear and expand their presence in dry environments, where amphibians were less dominant. These reptiles had adaptations that allowed them to reproduce without relying on water for egg development. The oceans of the late Paleozoic era contained a wide variety of marine life. Coral reefs existed in many shallow marine regions and supported complex ecosystems. Brachiopods were abundant and formed large communities on the seafloor. Crinoids, which are marine animals with long stalks attached to the seabed, were also widespread. Many types of mollusks lived in ocean waters, including species related to modern clams and snails. Fish diversity increased over time, with both cartilaginous and bony fish developing in different ecological roles. Marine ecosystems were sensitive to changes in temperature, oxygen levels, and chemical conditions of seawater. Toward the end of the Paleozoic era, environmental conditions began to shift in ways that placed stress on many living systems. Climate patterns changed across the planet. Some regions became drier, while ocean conditions began to lose stability. Oxygen levels in parts of the ocean decreased in certain areas, affecting marine organisms that required stable oxygen supply. Chemical changes in seawater also affected organisms that built shells or skeletons from minerals. These environmental changes did not occur in a single moment, but developed over extended time periods. Many species were unable to adapt to the shifting conditions. One of the major events during this time involved large-scale volcanic activity in a region that is now part of northern Asia. This volcanic activity released vast amounts of gases and material into the atmosphere over an extended period. These emissions affected air composition and contributed to changes in temperature and ocean chemistry. The release of carbon-based gases influenced global carbon cycles. Dust and particles in the atmosphere affected sunlight reaching Earth's surface. These conditions placed additional stress on ecosystems already undergoing environmental change. The combination of climate shifts, ocean changes, and volcanic activity contributed to a major reduction in the number of living species across land and sea. Many marine groups that had existed for long periods experienced severe decline. Reef-building organisms were strongly affected. Ocean ecosystems lost much of their structure in many regions. On land, plant communities also changed significantly. Swamp-based ecosystems reduced in size. Drier land areas expanded, and organisms that depended on stable moisture conditions experienced population reductions. Some groups of early reptiles and other land animals survived and adapted to new environmental conditions. During this time, the structure of ecosystems became less stable. Food chains were affected by the loss of species at multiple levels. Organisms that depended on specific plants or animals for food faced shortages. The reduction in biodiversity changed how energy moved through ecosystems. In marine environments, the loss of seafloor communities affected sediment structures and nutrient cycles. In land environments, changes in vegetation affected soil formation and water retention. These processes influenced further changes in living conditions across regions. The end of the Paleozoic era also involved changes in ocean circulation. Water movement patterns shifted due to changes in temperature and salinity. Some regions of the ocean became stratified, meaning layers of water with different properties formed and reduced mixing. This condition affected oxygen distribution in deeper waters. Organisms living in these regions faced difficult survival conditions. The chemistry of seawater changed in ways that affected organisms that depended on calcium carbonate for shell and skeleton formation. These changes influenced long-term survival of many marine species. On land, the expansion of arid environments changed the distribution of life forms. Plants that required consistent moisture became restricted to smaller regions. Seed-producing plants gained a stronger presence in dry areas because their reproductive systems did not depend on constant water availability. The structure of forests changed as older plant groups declined. Soil conditions changed due to differences in vegetation cover and decomposition rates. These changes affected erosion patterns and river systems. The internal heat of Earth also played a role in shaping conditions during this time. Movements within the planet's interior caused shifts in the crust. These movements created mountain-building events in some regions. Volcanic activity increased in certain areas due to these internal processes. The release of gases from volcanic systems contributed to atmospheric changes. These geological processes interacted with surface conditions and biological systems over long periods. The late Paleozoic world contained a wide range of ecological zones. Tropical regions supported dense vegetation in areas with sufficient moisture. Dry interior regions of large landmasses supported fewer plant types and more open landscapes. Coastal regions supported mixed ecosystems influenced by both marine and land conditions. River systems created corridors of life that connected different habitats. Seasonal variations influenced the availability of water and nutrients in many regions. Insects and other arthropods continued to diversify in land environments. Their presence supported decomposition processes and contributed to soil nutrient cycles. Some insect groups adapted to new plant types that were becoming more common in drier environments. Predator-prey relationships among land organisms continued to evolve. Early reptiles developed different feeding strategies that allowed them to use available resources in dry environments. Amphibians remained more common in wet regions where water bodies were stable. Marine ecosystems continued to experience instability in the final part of the Paleozoic era. Many shallow sea environments changed in depth and chemical composition. Organisms that built reef structures were reduced in number and distribution. Changes in sedimentation patterns affected habitats on the seafloor. Fish species continued to diversify in some areas, although overall marine biodiversity decreased in many regions. The balance of marine life shifted toward species that could tolerate changing oxygen and chemical conditions. The atmosphere continued to undergo changes related to gas composition. Oxygen and carbon dioxide levels influenced temperature and weather patterns. Rainfall distribution changed in different regions of the planet. Some areas experienced long dry conditions, while others had periods of increased rainfall. These variations influenced vegetation patterns and animal distribution. Wind patterns also changed due to temperature differences between land and sea regions. The end of the Permian period marks one of the most severe biological crises in Earth history. It took place around 252 million years ago when large portions of living species on land and in the oceans disappeared in a relatively short span of geological time. Before this event, life on Earth had already developed into many different forms. The land had forests of primitive plants, early seed plants, and wide areas covered with vegetation that supported many kinds of animals. Oceans contained diverse marine organisms, including early forms of corals, mollusks, and many groups of fish. On land, early reptiles, amphibian groups, insects, and other arthropods were present in various environments. The planet's ecosystems were complex and already showing long-term patterns of expansion and adaptation. During the late part of the Permian period, Earth experienced major environmental stress. During the late part of the Permian period, Earth experienced major environmental stress. The climate began to shift in ways that affected temperature, rainfall, and atmospheric conditions. Large volcanic activity occurred in what is now Siberia, releasing enormous amounts of lava and gases over extended periods. These events contributed to changes in the air and ocean systems. The atmosphere contained increasing amounts of gases that affected heat retention near the surface. Oceans experienced changes in temperature and chemistry that disrupted marine habitats. Oxygen levels in certain ocean regions decreased, which affected organisms that depended on stable oxygen supply. Many marine species that had existed for long periods of time became unable to continue their life cycles under these changing conditions. On land, plant communities also experienced pressure from shifting environmental conditions. Forest areas that had once been stable began to break into smaller and less continuous regions. Soil conditions changed due to variations in rainfall and temperature patterns. Many plant groups reduced in distribution or disappeared entirely. The loss of plant cover affected animals that depended on vegetation for food and shelter. Herbivorous reptiles and amphibian species began to face shortages in available resources. Carnivorous animals that depended on herbivores also began to lose their food sources. This chain of resource reduction affected entire land-based ecosystems. The extinction process did not occur in a single moment. It unfolded across a period of environmental instability that gradually reduced biological diversity. Many species experienced stress that affected reproduction rates, growth, and survival. Some organisms were able to survive in isolated regions where conditions remained relatively stable for longer periods. Other organisms were not able to adapt to the rapid changes in their surroundings. Marine environments were strongly affected, with reef systems collapsing and many bottom-dwelling organisms disappearing. The loss of these marine structures reduced habitats for many other species that depended on them for shelter and feeding grounds. The extinction event affected both ocean and land ecosystems in a connected way. Changes in ocean chemistry influenced the global carbon cycle. Changes in plant life influenced the amount of oxygen produced on land. Volcanic gases added further stress to atmospheric conditions. These overlapping changes created an environment where many species faced simultaneous pressures from multiple directions. The survival of species depended on their ability to tolerate wide variations in temperature, oxygen levels, and food availability. After the most intense phase of extinction activity passed, Earth entered a long period of ecological recovery. The planet's surface environments were left with reduced biological diversity. Many ecological roles that had been filled by extinct organisms were no longer occupied. This created open ecological spaces in both marine and terrestrial environments. Surviving organisms began to expand into these available roles over time. The recovery process took a long duration, during which ecosystems slowly re-established complexity through new forms of life. On land, reptiles became one of the most important groups to survive the extinction event. Reptiles had already existed during the Permian period in several forms. They included early groups that had developed features suited for life away from water. Their bodies had adaptations that reduced dependency on moist environments. Their reproductive systems included eggs that could develop on land, reducing the need for aquatic breeding environments. These characteristics allowed certain reptile groups to survive environmental conditions that were difficult for many amphibian species. After the extinction event, reptiles began to occupy many ecological roles that had previously been filled by other groups. With fewer competing species, reptiles expanded into available habitats. Some reptile lineages developed larger body sizes over time, while others remained small and adapted to specific ecological niches. The absence of many earlier dominant land animals allowed reptiles to diversify in multiple directions. Forest areas that regenerated after environmental conditions stabilized provided habitats for tree-dwelling and ground-dwelling reptiles. Open land environments supported reptiles that moved across wide areas in search of food. The early part of the Triassic period followed the Permian extinction. During this time, environmental conditions continued to stabilize in gradual stages. Temperatures remained elevated in many regions, and seasonal patterns differed from earlier periods. Plant life began to recover, with new types of vegetation spreading across land surfaces. These plants provided food resources for herbivorous reptiles that were expanding in number and distribution. As plant communities stabilized, food chains began to rebuild. Herbivores supported carnivorous reptiles, which developed new feeding strategies and movement patterns. Marine environments also began to recover after the extinction event. New marine species emerged and expanded into ecological roles left vacant by extinct organisms. Fish populations diversified, and new groups of marine reptiles appeared. These marine reptiles adapted to life in ocean environments and developed body structures suited for swimming and hunting in water. Coral systems slowly began to rebuild in certain regions, although their structure and composition differed from earlier reef systems. The rise of reptiles on land continued through the early Triassic period. Different groups developed variations in body structure, feeding behavior, and movement. Some reptiles developed stronger limbs for walking and running on land surfaces. Others developed lighter bodies that allowed quicker movement across open terrain. Certain groups developed teeth and jaw structures adapted for specific diets, including plant material, insects, and other animals. The diversity of reptiles increased as they occupied different ecological positions across ecosystems. The recovery of ecosystems after the Permian's extinction remained uneven across regions and time periods. Some areas recovered plant and animal diversity faster than others. Environmental conditions continued to fluctuate, affecting the distribution of species. Reptiles adapted to these changing conditions through gradual biological changes over many generations. Their reproductive strategies allowed populations to grow in environments where conditions were temporarily favorable. In many land environments, early reptile groups that had survived the extinction event gave rise to new evolutionary branches. These branches developed distinct anatomical features. Some developed stronger skull structures for feeding on tougher plant materials. Others developed flexible body forms that allowed movement through dense vegetation. Certain groups developed sensory adaptations that improved their ability to detect food and environmental changes. These adaptations supported survival in environments that were still recovering from ecological disruption. The early Triassic ecosystems were not fully stable. Environmental changes continued to occur, affecting temperature patterns and rainfall distribution. Seasonal variation influenced the availability of food resources in different regions. Reptiles responded to these conditions through migration patterns and local adaptation. Populations in different regions developed distinct characteristics based on available resources and environmental pressures. During this period, competition among surviving species remained limited due to the reduced number of large land animals. This allowed reptiles to expand into many ecological roles with less restriction. Over time, this expansion led to increased diversity in body size, feeding behavior, and habitat use. Some reptiles became specialized in hunting smaller animals, while others focused on plant-based diets. Aquatic reptiles adapted to freshwater and marine environments, expanding their presence in water systems. The structure of ecosystems gradually became more complex as plant life continued to recover and spread. Forests developed in areas where soil and climate conditions supported growth. These forests provided shelter and food sources for reptiles that lived in wooded environments. Ground-dwelling reptiles used forest floors for hunting and movement. Arboreal reptiles adapted to climbing and living among vegetation. These different habitat uses contributed to the overall diversity of reptile life during this period. The chemical composition of the atmosphere and oceans continued to adjust after the extinction event. Oxygen levels began to stabilize in many regions, supporting the return of more complex life forms. Carbon dioxide levels gradually shifted as plant life increased and volcanic activity decreased over time. These changes influenced temperature patterns and environmental stability. Reptiles, being adaptable to a range of conditions, continued to spread into newly suitable environments. The recovery of biodiversity was gradual and extended across long periods of time. Many ecosystems took extensive durations to regain complexity. Reptiles played a central role in this recovery by occupying ecological roles that had been vacant. Their presence influenced the development of new food webs and ecological interactions. Predator and prey relationships developed again in multiple environments, supporting further diversification of species. As time continued through the Triassic period, reptile groups expanded further into new forms. Some lineages developed characteristics that would later lead to major groups of reptiles in later geological periods. These developments included changes in limb structure, skull formation, and metabolic processes. The diversity of reptile life became a defining feature of terrestrial ecosystems during this stage of Earth's history. The distribution of reptiles across continents expanded as landmasses shifted due to geological processes. Connected land regions allowed movement of species across large areas. Reptiles spread into new environments, adapting to local conditions in each region. Environmental variation contributed to differences in reptile populations across the planet. These variations supported ongoing diversification within reptile groups. The time known as the Triassic period began after a major global extinction event that removed a very large number of living species from Earth. This extinction happened near 252 million years ago. It affected both land and ocean environments and changed the direction of life on Earth. After this event, living things slowly returned in number and variety. The early part of the Triassic period was a time when ecosystems were still unstable, and many ecological roles were open for new organisms to occupy. The world during this period was shaped by changing climates, recovering soils, shifting seas, and the gradual return of complex life systems. The land during the early Triassic period was organized into one large connected landmass known as Pangea. This landmass stretched from high northern regions to far southern regions. Large interior regions of this landmass were far from ocean influence, which led to dry conditions in many areas. Seasonal changes in temperature and rainfall were present in different regions. Some areas experienced long dry periods, while others received limited seasonal rainfall. These conditions influenced how plants and animals spread and survived across the land. The soil in many regions had been heavily affected by the extinction event that occurred earlier. Nutrient cycles were disrupted, and many areas of land had reduced biological activity. The process of soil recovery involved slow rebuilding of organic content. Microorganisms in the soil began to increase in number again, and this allowed plant life to gradually re-establish itself. Plant communities in the early Triassic were not yet fully developed. Some plant groups that had survived the extinction event continued to grow and spread. These included certain types of seed plants and fern-like plants. Their presence helped stabilize soil in some regions and provided basic ground cover. In the oceans, recovery also took place in a gradual manner. Marine environments had experienced severe loss of species, including many reef-forming organisms. After the extinction event, reef systems were largely absent for a long period. The ocean floor in many areas had low diversity of life at the beginning of the Triassic period. Over time, marine microorganisms began to increase in number again. These microorganisms played a role in restoring nutrient cycles in ocean water. Small marine animals such as early mollusks and simple shell-bearing organisms began to appear in greater numbers. The structure of marine ecosystems slowly became more complex as new groups of animals developed. The climate of the early Triassic period included periods of high heat in many regions. Atmospheric carbon levels were elevated after the extinction event, which influenced global temperatures. This condition affected both land and sea environments. Some regions experienced strong seasonal variation in rainfall, while other regions remained dry for extended periods. These environmental conditions influenced where plants and animals could live and how they spread across the land surface. The early Triassic period also saw the presence of many surviving groups of reptiles. These reptiles had survived the extinction event and began to expand into ecological roles that had previously been occupied by other organisms. Some of these reptiles lived on land, while others moved between land and water environments. Their body structures allowed them to adapt to different types of terrain and food sources. Over time, reptile groups became more diverse and new species began to appear. Amphibians also survived the extinction event and continued to exist in freshwater environments. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands provided habitats for these animals. Early Triassic amphibians often lived in areas where water was available for reproduction. Their life cycles depended on aquatic environments, which made freshwater systems important for their survival. As freshwater habitats stabilized, amphibian populations increased in certain regions. Insects were also part of the recovering ecosystems. Many insect groups survived the extinction event and continued to evolve during the Triassic period. Insects played roles in plant interaction, decomposition processes, and food chains. As plant life expanded again, insects found new sources of food and habitat. Some insects fed on plant material while others fed on other small organisms. Their presence contributed to the development of more complex land ecosystems. As the early Triassic period progressed, plant life began to expand further. Seed plants became more widespread in many regions. These plants were able to reproduce without needing freestanding water for fertilization, which allowed them to survive in drier environments. Ferns and fern-like plants continued to grow in areas where moisture was available. Plant communities gradually became more structured, and different plant types began to occupy different environmental zones based on moisture and soil conditions. River systems played an important role in distributing nutrients and supporting life. Rivers carried sediments from higher land areas to lower regions. These sediments helped create environments where new plant growth could occur. Riverbanks often supported clusters of vegetation, which in turn supported herbivorous animals. Freshwater systems also supported fish populations that had survived the extinction event. These fish began to diversify into different forms over time. In the middle portion of the Triassic period, ecosystems became more stable in many regions. Plant diversity increased, and forests began to develop in some areas. These forests were not yet dominated by the types of large trees seen in later geological periods, but they contained a variety of seed plants and other vegetation. The expansion of plant life provided more food sources for herbivorous reptiles and other animals. Herbivorous reptiles increased in number and variety during this time. These animals fed on available plant material including leaves, stems, and seeds. Their feeding activity influenced plant distribution across different regions. Carnivorous reptiles also appeared in greater numbers. These animals fed on herbivorous reptiles and other animals. The interaction between plant-eating and meat-eating reptiles contributed to the development of more complex ecological structures. Some reptile groups developed adaptations for moving efficiently across land. Limb structures varied among different species, allowing movement in different environments such as dry land, riverbanks, and forested regions. Some reptiles were able to move both in water and on land, which allowed them to access multiple food sources. These adaptations supported the spread of reptiles across different parts of Pangea. Marine ecosystems during the Middle Triassic period continued to recover and diversify. Coral-like organisms began to reappear in some regions of shallow seas. These organisms contributed to the formation of early reef structures. Marine mollusks, including gastropods and bivalves, became more common in ocean environments. Fish populations also became more diverse, with different species adapting to various depths and water conditions. Ocean chemistry during this period was influenced by earlier environmental changes. Nutrient levels gradually stabilized, allowing marine life to expand. Some regions of the ocean still experienced low oxygen conditions, which limited the types of organisms that could survive there. Over time, oxygen levels in many marine environments improved, supporting increased biological activity. Insects continued to diversify during the Middle Triassic period. Some insect groups developed wings that allowed more efficient movement through the air. These insects contributed to pollination processes in plant ecosystems. Although flowering plants had not yet developed during this time, insects still interacted with seed plants and other vegetation in ways that supported ecological processes. The late Triassic period marked a time when ecosystems had developed higher levels of complexity in both land and sea environments. Forests expanded in some regions, with plant communities becoming more organized. Conifer-like plants became more widespread in many areas. These plants were able to grow in different environmental conditions, including dry regions and areas with seasonal rainfall. Their spread contributed to the development of large plant-covered regions on parts of Pangea. Herbivorous reptiles during the late Triassic period occupied many ecological roles. Some species fed on low vegetation, while others fed on higher plant structures. Their feeding patterns influenced plant growth and distribution. Carnivorous reptiles also diversified further, occupying different positions within food systems. Some of these predators became specialized in hunting specific types of prey, while others had more general feeding habits. Large river systems continued to support biodiversity. Floodplain areas along rivers provided fertile soil for plant growth. These regions supported dense vegetation in some areas, which in turn supported herbivores and predators. Seasonal changes in river flow influenced the availability of resources in these environments. Freshwater ecosystems remained important habitats for fish and amphibians. Fish species diversified into different ecological roles, with some living in fast-moving waters and others in slower waters. Amphibians continued to depend on aquatic environments for reproduction and survival. Wetland areas provided stable habitats for many of these organisms. Marine ecosystems during the late Triassic period showed continued diversification. Coral-like organisms became more established in shallow marine environments. Reef structures began to support a wider range of marine life. Fish populations increased in diversity and occupied different ecological niches. Marine reptiles also appeared during this time. These reptiles lived in ocean environments and adapted to life in water. Their presence added new forms of life to marine ecosystems. The atmosphere during the Triassic period contained varying levels of gases that influenced climate conditions. Temperature patterns varied across different regions of Pangea. Some areas experienced strong seasonal temperature changes, while others remained more stable. Rainfall patterns also varied, influencing the distribution of vegetation and animal life. Soil systems continued to develop throughout the Triassic period. Organic material from plants and animals contributed to soil formation. Microorganisms played a role in breaking down organic matter and recycling nutrients. These processes supported plant growth and helped maintain ecosystem stability in many regions. By the later stages of the Triassic period, many ecological systems had regained complexity. Land environments supported a wide range of plants, herbivores, and carnivores. Marine environments supported diverse fish, invertebrates, and marine reptiles. Freshwater systems supported amphibians and fish species. Insects were present in most terrestrial environments and interacted with plants and other animals in multiple ways. The distribution of life across Pangea was influenced by climate zones, water availability, and soil conditions. Regions with more consistent water supply supported denser vegetation and higher animal populations. Dry interior regions supported organisms adapted to limited water availability. Coastal regions supported marine and nearshore ecosystems with high biological activity. Evolutionary processes during the Triassic period operated across many millions of years. New species formed through gradual changes in genetic material within populations. Environmental conditions influenced which organisms were able to survive and reproduce. As ecosystems became more stable, a wider range of life forms developed. Freshwater and marine connectivity in some regions allowed movement of organisms between different habitats. River systems that reached coastal areas created pathways for nutrient flow and organism movement. These connections supported the spread of certain species across wide regions. Reptile groups during the Triassic period developed a wide range of body forms and behaviors. Some were small and fast-moving, while others were larger and slower. Some were adapted for climbing, others for digging, and others for swimming. These variations allowed reptiles to occupy many ecological roles. During the time when dinosaurs were beginning their early development on land, many other reptiles were also living and spreading across different environments on Earth. These reptiles were not dinosaurs, but they were closely related to them in a broad sense because they all belonged to a larger group of reptiles that had developed earlier. The land, seas, and skies of that ancient world were filled with many different forms of reptile life, each adapting to specific conditions and ways of living. The environments of that time included dry land areas, river systems, lakes, coastal regions, and wide ocean spaces. Each of these environments supported reptiles that developed their own body structures, feeding methods and movement abilities to survive in their surroundings. Among the reptiles living on land, there were groups that shared ancestry with modern crocodiles. These reptiles had body forms that were often long and low to the ground, with strong tails and powerful jaws. Their limbs were positioned in a way that allowed steady movement across land surfaces, and some were capable of moving both on land and in shallow water. These crocodile relatives were not identical to modern crocodiles, but they had several features that would later appear in crocodiles that exist today. Their skulls were often long, with teeth designed for gripping and holding onto food. Their skin was covered in thick protective structures that helped reduce damage from physical contact with the environment and from struggles with other animals. Some of these crocodile relatives lived near river systems where water was abundant and food sources were frequent. These environments provided fish, smaller reptiles, and other animals that could be captured. Other forms of these reptiles lived in drier regions where water was less constant, and they depended more on land-based food sources. In such environments, movement across dry ground became an important part of survival. Their bodies developed in ways that allowed them to conserve energy while traveling across long distances in search of food and water. The internal structure of these reptiles supported a strong muscle system, especially in the jaw and tail regions. The jaw muscles allowed them to grip prey firmly, while the tail helped in balance and movement. The skull bones were often thick and well reinforced, which provided strength during feeding and interactions with other animals. Their teeth varied in shape depending on feeding habits, with some species having sharp, pointed teeth for holding slippery prey, while others had broader teeth for crushing harder food items. Alongside these crocodile relatives, marine reptiles were also widely present in the oceans and seas. These marine reptiles were not fish and they were not amphibians, but they were reptiles that had adapted fully to life in water. Their bodies developed in ways that allowed them to move efficiently through aquatic environments. Their limbs in many cases changed into paddle-shaped structures that could push against water to create movement. Their tails often became strong tools for propulsion, allowing steady forward motion through marine environments. These marine reptiles occupied different levels of the ocean environment. Some lived closer to the surface where sunlight was more available and where many smaller marine animals could be found. Others lived in deeper waters where they hunted larger prey and moved through darker regions of the ocean. Their feeding habits depended on the types of animals available in their surroundings, which included fish, squid-like creatures, and other marine reptiles. The bodies of marine reptiles often showed smooth surfaces that reduced resistance while moving through water. Their bones in some cases became lighter compared to land reptiles, which helped them maintain buoyancy and movement in aquatic conditions. Their eyes were often large, allowing them to detect movement in underwater environments where light levels changed frequently. The neck structures of some marine reptiles were long, allowing them to reach prey from different angles without moving the entire body. Breathing in marine reptiles still required access to air, so they needed to come to the surface regularly. This behavior influenced their movement patterns and the distances they could travel in the ocean. They often followed routes that allowed them to reach air surfaces while continuing to search for food. Their reproductive methods also remained tied to their reptile ancestry, meaning that many returned to land or shallow coastal areas to lay eggs depending on the species. Another major group of reptiles during this time were flying reptiles that lived in the skies. These reptiles developed structures that allowed them to glide and fly through the air. Their wings were formed from skin membranes supported by elongated finger bones. This structure allowed them to extend their wings and create lift during movement through air. Their bones were often lightweight, which helped reduce the energy needed for flight. Flying reptiles occupied different parts of the sky environment. Some flew over land areas where they searched for small animals, insects and other food sources. Others flew over coastal regions and open seas where they could find marine life near the surface of the water. Their ability to move through the air allowed them to access food sources that were not available to animals restricted to land or water surfaces. The skulls of flying reptiles often contained long jaw structures with sharp teeth. These teeth were used to capture and hold onto prey during flight. Their eyes were positioned in ways that supported depth perception and detection of movement below them. The neck structure allowed flexibility, which helped in adjusting head position while flying and feeding. The wing membrane of flying reptiles stretched from the elongated finger to the side of the body, or hind limbs depending on the specific group. This membrane was supported by muscles and connective tissue that allowed control of movement during flight. The ability to adjust wing shape helped in controlling speed and direction. Some flying reptiles were capable of sustained flight, while others used shorter bursts of flight combined with gliding. The environment of the time supported these flying reptiles through the presence of insects and small vertebrates on land, as well as fish and marine animals near the water surface. This variety of food sources allowed flying reptiles to occupy different ecological roles depending on their size and flight ability. Some species were small and lightweight, focusing on quick movement and rapid feeding, while others were larger and capable of traveling longer distances. The development of these reptiles was influenced by changes in climate and geography during the Triassic period. Large land areas experienced changes in temperature and rainfall patterns, which created different habitats across the world. Some regions were dry and open, while others had more vegetation and water sources. These conditions supported the spread of different reptile groups into new areas, where they adapted to local environments over time. River systems played an important role in the distribution of crocodile relatives and other semi-aquatic reptiles. These water systems provided food, shelter, and movement pathways across land regions. Lakes and coastal environments also supported marine reptiles during feeding and reproduction cycles. The connection between land and water environments created zones where multiple reptile groups interacted in various ways based on resource availability. The skeletal structure of these reptiles shows important details about their movement and lifestyle. In crocodile relatives, strong limb bones and reinforced joints supported walking and swimming movements. In marine reptiles, limb structures were modified into paddle shapes with elongated bones arranged to support water movement. In flying reptiles, bone structures were reduced in weight and extended in specific areas to support wing formation. The respiratory systems of these reptiles were adapted to their environments. Land-based crocodile relatives used lungs for breathing air and had efficient systems for oxygen intake during both rest and movement. Marine reptiles also used lungs, requiring periodic access to air, which influenced their movement patterns in water. Flying reptiles had high oxygen demands due to flight activity, and their respiratory systems supported continuous airflow to maintain energy levels during movement in the sky. Reproduction among these reptiles involved egg-laying in many species. Eggs were often placed in protected areas such as soil, sand, or vegetation, depending on environmental conditions. In marine reptiles, egg-laying likely occurred in coastal regions where young could access water after hatching. Flying reptiles also depended on land-based nesting areas where eggs could be protected from environmental changes and predators. The growth of young reptiles involved stages of development where body structures gradually became more specialized for their adult roles. young crocodile relatives developed stronger limbs and jaws over time as they learned to hunt and move through their environments. Marine reptiles developed swimming abilities as their limbs and tails strengthened. Flying reptiles developed wing structures that required time and growth before full flight ability was reached. Food chains during this period included interactions among these reptile groups and other animals. Crocodile relatives sometimes fed on fish or smaller reptiles, while marine reptiles fed on aquatic animals within their environments. Flying reptiles captured small animals in the air or near surfaces. These feeding patterns supported the distribution of energy through ecosystems across land, water, and air environments. The diversity of reptile forms during this time shows a wide range of adaptations to different ecological conditions. Body size varied from small species that moved quickly and fed on limited resources to large species that required more energy and consumed larger prey. The variation in size influenced movement ability, feeding range, and habitat selection across different reptile groups. The structure of the skin in these reptiles provided protection and support for their lifestyles. Crocodile relatives had thick protective skin layers that reduced injury risk and helped maintain moisture. Marine reptiles had smoother skin surfaces that supported movement in water. Flying reptiles often had lighter skin structures connected to wing membranes that allowed air movement and flexibility. Sensory systems in these reptiles were adapted to environmental needs. Vision played an important role in all groups, supporting hunting and navigation. Hearing and smell were also important, especially for detecting food and environmental changes. Marine reptiles relied heavily on vision in underwater environments, while flying reptiles depended on visual accuracy during movement through air. The distribution of these reptiles across different regions of the Earth created complex ecosystems where multiple species shared environments. Land regions supported crocodile relatives and early dinosaur forms. Marine environments supported large reptile predators and smaller aquatic species. Air environments were occupied by flying reptiles that moved between land and water zones in search of food. The interactions between these reptiles and their environments were shaped by resource availability, climate conditions, and physical geography. Changes in rainfall, temperature, and sea levels influenced where reptiles could live and how they moved across regions. River systems expanded or reduced in size depending on climate patterns, affecting the movement of crocodile relatives and other semi-aquatic reptiles. Marine environments changed based on coastal development and ocean conditions. These changes affected feeding and migration patterns of marine reptiles. Flying reptiles responded to environmental conditions by adjusting flight routes and feeding areas based on food availability and weather patterns. The long duration of the Triassic period allowed these reptiles to develop and spread across many parts of the world. Over time, their forms became more specialized for their environments, leading to a wide range of body structures and behaviors. These developments created a complex biological system, where reptiles occupied nearly every available ecological space across land, water, and air. The earliest dinosaurs began their history during a time when life on land was already recovering from earlier global changes that had strongly reduced many groups of animals. The land was slowly becoming occupied again by many different reptiles, amphibians, and early relatives of mammals, and ecosystems were being filled step by step in new ways. Within this setting, dinosaurs appeared as a distinct group of reptiles that shared a set of anatomical features that supported upright walking and efficient movement on land. These early dinosaurs were not dominant at the beginning of their history, and they existed alongside many other reptile groups that occupied similar environments. Their early development involved gradual changes in body structure, movement style, feeding habits, and growth patterns, all of which unfolded over long stretches of time. The earliest known dinosaurs appeared during the late part of the Triassic period, which was a time when the continents were joined together in a single large landmass. The environments of this time included dry inland regions, seasonal river systems, and areas with scattered vegetation. Rainfall patterns were uneven in many places, and this created conditions where animals had to adapt to periods of limited water availability and changing plant growth. In these environments, early dinosaurs developed body structures that allowed them to move efficiently across different types of ground surfaces. Their legs were positioned under their bodies, which supported a more direct form of movement over land. This arrangement of limbs played an important role in their ability to travel in search of food and water. The skeletons of the earliest dinosaurs show that they had several important features in common. Their hip structures were shaped in a way that supported strong attachment points for leg muscles. Their backbone was arranged to allow stability during movement. Their skulls varied in shape depending on feeding habits, but many early forms had relatively small heads compared to body size. Teeth were adapted for different diets, including eating plant material, small animals, and insects. These early dinosaurs did not all follow the same feeding pattern, and variation in diet was already present in the earliest stages of their development. The earliest dinosaur fossils indicate that they were relatively small in body size during the initial phases of their evolution. Their size allowed them to move through environments where larger animals already existed. In many cases, these dinosaurs shared landscapes with early crocodile relatives, large amphibians, and other reptile groups that had different body plans. The presence of many types of animals in the same environment meant that early dinosaurs occupied specific ecological roles that were shaped by food availability, movement ability, and reproductive strategies. Growth patterns in early dinosaurs show that they developed in stages from hatchlings to adults. Bone structures indicate that growth was often continuous, with changes in bone density and shape occurring as individuals aged. The structure of their bones also shows that they had efficient systems for supporting body weight during movement. The arrangement of muscles attached to the skeleton allowed for coordinated movement of the limbs, spine, and tail. The tail played a role in balance during movement, especially when the animals changed direction or adjusted their speed while moving across land. The early evolution of dinosaurs involved a gradual diversification of body types. Some early dinosaurs developed longer necks, which supported feeding on vegetation at different heights. Others developed stronger jaws and teeth that allowed them to process tougher plant material or capture small animals. The differences in skull shape, jaw strength, and tooth arrangement show that feeding strategies were already becoming varied during early stages of dinosaur evolution. These variations allowed dinosaurs to occupy different roles within the same environments without directly competing for identical food sources. The development of upright posture in dinosaurs was an important step in their early evolution. Unlike many earlier reptiles whose legs extended outward from the sides of their bodies, dinosaurs had limbs positioned beneath the body. This structure supported more efficient movement over land and reduced strain on the joints during walking and running. The bones of the legs became stronger and more adapted to supporting body weight directly. The joints in the hips, knees, and ankles allowed for controlled movement in multiple directions, which supported changes in speed and direction. Early dinosaurs also showed changes in their respiratory systems. Evidence from bone structure suggests that airflow through the body was supported by internal systems that allowed efficient oxygen distribution. This adaptation supported sustained activity during movement and may have contributed to the ability of dinosaurs to travel across large areas in search of resources. The combination of skeletal and respiratory features supported an active lifestyle that was different from many other reptiles of the same time period. The earliest dinosaur groups included forms that would later give rise to major lineages. Some of these early forms had characteristics that were shared between later herbivorous and carnivorous groups. Their body structures were not yet fully specialized, and many features existed in transitional forms. Over time, these early dinosaurs began to diverge into separate evolutionary paths. Some lineages developed more specialized teeth and jaws for consuming plant material, while others developed sharper teeth and stronger jaw muscles for capturing and consuming animal prey. The environment in which early dinosaurs evolved also played a role in shaping their development. Seasonal changes in rainfall influenced the availability of vegetation and water sources. River systems shifted over time, creating new areas for animals to inhabit. Floodplains provided regions where plant growth was more abundant, while drier regions required animals to travel longer distances to find resources. These environmental conditions influenced movement patterns and feeding behavior in early dinosaurs. Reproduction in early dinosaurs involved laying eggs, which were placed in locations that provided some level of protection from environmental conditions. Fossil evidence from related species suggests that nesting behaviors may have included selecting specific sites for egg laying. The development of eggs allowed young dinosaurs to begin life in a relatively independent state after hatching. Growth after hatching involved gradual development of skeletal and muscular systems that supported movement and feeding. The skin of early dinosaurs likely had different textures depending on the group. Some may have had scales similar to other reptiles, while others may have had structures that supported temperature regulation or display features. Skin structures are rarely preserved in fossils, but related evidence from later dinosaur groups suggests that variation in skin type existed early in dinosaur evolution. These surface features may have played roles in protection from environmental conditions and interactions within species. Early dinosaurs also developed sensory systems that supported survival in their environments. Vision was likely important for detecting movement and locating food sources. The structure of the skull indicates that many early dinosaurs had eye placement that allowed a wide field of view. Hearing and smell were also important senses, especially for locating food and detecting other animals in the environment. The brain structure of early dinosaurs shows regions associated with movement coordination, sensory processing, and basic behavioral responses. The diversification of early dinosaurs continued over long periods of time. As populations spread into different regions, variations in body structure became more pronounced. Some groups adapted to forested environments, where vegetation was more dense and movement required navigation through complex terrain. Others adapted to open regions, where movement involved traveling across wide spaces with fewer obstacles. These differences influenced limb structure, tail length, and body flexibility. In some early dinosaur groups, changes in skull shape indicate shifts in feeding behavior. Narrow skulls with specific tooth arrangements supported selective feeding on certain plant types, while broader skulls with stronger jaw muscles supported feeding on tougher materials. Carnivorous early dinosaurs developed teeth that were shaped for gripping and processing animal tissue. These differences in skull and tooth structure represent early stages of specialization that would continue over long periods. the fossil record of early dinosaurs shows that they were present in multiple regions of the ancient landmass. Their distribution suggests that they were able to adapt to different environmental conditions. The ability to move across large areas allowed populations to spread and establish new groups in different locations. This movement contributed to the gradual expansion of dinosaur presence across land environments. Bone microstructure in early dinosaurs provides information about growth rates and metabolic activity. The patterns observed in fossil bones indicate that growth was often steady over time, with periods of faster development during certain stages of life. These patterns suggest that early dinosaurs had biological systems that supported continuous development from juvenile to adult stages. The internal structure of bones also shows evidence of strength and flexibility, supporting movement and physical activity. Early dinosaurs interacted with other animal groups in their environments. They shared habitats with early crocodile relatives, large amphibians, and other reptiles that had different body structures and feeding habits. These interactions influenced movement patterns and resource use. The presence of multiple animal groups in the same environments created complex ecological settings where different species occupied specific roles based on their abilities and needs. As early dinosaur lineages continued to develop, some groups became more specialized in their movement and feeding strategies. Changes in limb length and muscle attachment allowed certain dinosaurs to move with greater efficiency over different terrain types. Changes in jaw structure allowed for more effective processing of food sources. These adaptations occurred gradually and were reflected in changes in bone structure over time. The early stages of dinosaur evolution also involved changes in reproductive development. Egg structure and nesting behavior became more refined in some groups. The placement of nests and the number of eggs produced likely varied between species. These reproductive strategies supported the survival of offspring in environments where conditions could change over time. The evolution of early dinosaurs was also influenced by changes in plant life during the same period. Vegetation patterns shifted across different regions, with some areas supporting dense plant growth, while others had more limited vegetation. These changes affected feeding opportunities and movement patterns. Herbivorous early dinosaurs adapted to available plant resources, while carnivorous forms adapted to the presence of prey animals in the same environments. The structure of early dinosaur limbs shows adaptation for weight-bearing and movement efficiency. The joints allowed for controlled motion, and the arrangement of bones supported stability during walking and running. The tail often contributed to balance, especially during changes in direction. These physical features were important in supporting the active movement patterns observed in early dinosaur fossils. The development of early dinosaurs also involved changes in internal physiology. The arrangement of organs within the body supported energy use during movement and growth. The respiratory system likely supported efficient oxygen intake, which contributed to sustained activity levels. The circulatory system distributed nutrients and oxygen throughout the body, supporting growth and movement. As time continued, early dinosaur populations expanded into new environments and continued to diversify. Variations in body size, shape, and feeding behavior became more pronounced across different groups. These changes were reflected in fossil remains found in different geological layers. The distribution of fossils shows that dinosaurs gradually became more widespread across land environments during the later stages of their early evolution. The breakup of Pangea refers to a long sequence of changes in Earth's outer rocky layer during a very distant part of geological time, when all major land areas were once joined into one large continuous landmass. This landmass existed during a period that began several 100 million years ago, when the arrangement of continents was very different from the present day. Over long spans of time, the outer layer of Earth slowly moved, and this movement caused the large landmass to separate into several parts that gradually shifted into new positions. These changes also altered the conditions of land, sea, air, and living environments across the planet. At the time when all the land was joined together, Earth's surface conditions were arranged in a way that allowed extensive, interior land regions to exist far from ocean influence. Large areas of dry land stretched across vast distances, and the interior regions experienced environmental conditions shaped by distance from moisture sources. Coastal zones existed at the edges of this landmass, where ocean water met the continuous land surface. The arrangement of land influenced how air moved across the surface, how moisture travelled, and how rainfall was distributed in different regions. As time passed, the outer shell of Earth, which is made of multiple moving sections, began to shift in slow motion. These sections are known as tectonic plates. The movement of these plates caused stress along different zones within the large landmass. Over long intervals, these stresses increased, and the continuous land surface began to develop areas where it stretched, cracked, and slowly separated. These separations did not occur in a single moment, but took place across many millions of years. During this extended process, internal heat from Earth played a role in moving material beneath the surface. Hot rock material within the deeper layers rose and moved sideways, contributing to the gradual shifting of the plates above. This movement influenced how the landmass changed shape. The stretching of the surface created zones where the crust became thinner. These thinner zones became areas where the land eventually split apart. The initial stages of separation involved long rift systems forming within the interior of the supercontinent. These rifts were elongated zones where the land began to pull apart. As the rifts developed, they allowed magma from deeper layers to move closer to the surface. When this material reached the surface, it cooled and formed new rock. This process contributed to the creation of new oceanic crust in developing ocean basins. Over time, water filled the widening gaps created by rifting. These early water-filled zones developed into young seas that continued to expand. The movement of the surrounding landmasses influenced the shape and direction of these seas. As separation continued, large sections of land moved away from each other, forming distinct continental blocks. These blocks gradually became the main continents that exist in the present geological arrangement. One major division involved the separation of northern and southern large land areas. The northern region is referred to as Laurasia, while the southern region is referred to as Gondwana. These two large divisions were part of the early stages of the breakup process. The separation between these regions developed slowly and involved continuous movement of tectonic plates. Each region contained multiple landmasses that would later become individual continents. Within Gondwana, several land areas began to shift away from each other over long periods. These included regions that would eventually become Africa, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and the Indian subcontinent. Each of these land areas moved in different directions due to plate motion. The movement occurred at rates that were extremely slow in human terms, but significant over geological time. Within Laurasia, land areas that would become North America, Europe, and parts of Asia also experienced separation. These movements created new ocean basins between the separating landmasses. The formation of ocean basins involved the continuous creation of new oceanic crust as plates moved apart. This process contributed to the expansion of ocean waters into newly formed spaces. As the breakup continued, environmental conditions across the planet began to change in many regions. Areas that were once located deep within the interior of the continuous landmass became closer to ocean influence as new seas formed. These changes affected moisture distribution, temperature patterns, and seasonal conditions. Coastal regions expanded as new shorelines developed along separating continents. The movement of continents also affected river systems. Rivers that once flowed across continuous land were disrupted as the surface changed shape. New drainage patterns formed as landmasses shifted position. Some river systems shortened, while others extended into new directions depending on the evolving surface structure. Lakes and inland seas formed in areas where water collected in low regions created by tectonic activity. Volcanic activity increased in many rift zones during the separation process. As the crust thinned and stretched, magma moved upward more easily. This led to the formation of volcanic regions along areas where new ocean basins were developing. These volcanic processes contributed new material to the surface and influenced the structure of newly formed land and ocean boundaries. The climate across Earth's surface was also influenced by the breakup process. Large continuous land areas experienced internal regions that were far from ocean influence. As separation continued, new ocean pathways developed, allowing moisture to reach regions that were previously dry. The distribution of rainfall changed as ocean currents began to form in newly created basins. Ocean circulation patterns developed gradually as ocean basins expanded. Water movement between different ocean regions became more structured as the basins widened. These circulation patterns influenced temperature distribution in surrounding coastal areas. The interaction between ocean water and air above it contributed to the development of local environmental conditions. The movement of continental blocks also affected the distribution of plant and animal life. As land areas separated, populations of organisms became isolated in different regions. This isolation influenced how living systems developed in each area over long periods. Different environments formed as continents moved into new positions, creating varied conditions for ecosystems. The separation of land also influenced the formation of mountain ranges. In areas where tectonic plates moved toward each other, the land was compressed and pushed upward. These processes created elevated regions with complex geological structures. In other areas, stretching and thinning of the crust created basins that later filled with sediment and water. Sediment accumulation increased in newly formed basins. Material from erosion of nearby land areas was transported by rivers and wind into low regions. Over long periods, these sediments built up in layers. These layers recorded information about environmental conditions during different stages of the breakup process. The timing of these changes occurred across extremely long spans of geological time. The initial formation of the continuous landmass occurred several 100 million years ago. The main stages of separation began around 200 million years ago. The process continued through subsequent geological periods, with ongoing movement of landmasses shaping the arrangement of continents. As separation continued, new ocean basins, such as the early Atlantic Ocean, began to develop. These basins expanded as continents moved apart. The widening of ocean space allowed water circulation systems to become more complex. The development of oceanic crust continued along mid-ocean ridges, where new material was formed and added to the ocean floor. The movement of India as a landmass involved long-distance travel across oceanic space after separating from Gondwana. This movement occurred over millions of years as tectonic forces directed the landmass toward a new position. During this movement, oceanic crust was created and destroyed in different regions as part of the ongoing tectonic cycle. Antarctica also shifted into a polar position over time. This movement affected its environmental conditions, leading to long-term changes in surface climate and ice formation processes. Australia moved away from Antarctic connection and drifted into a separate position, leading to distinct environmental development in that region. South America and Africa gradually moved apart, forming a widening ocean basin between them. This separation influenced the development of marine environments in the newly formed ocean space. Coastal regions on both continents developed independently as separation continued. The changing positions of continents influenced wind patterns across Earth's surface. As landmasses moved, the paths of atmospheric circulation adjusted. This affected how moisture moved between oceans and land areas. Seasonal conditions in many regions shifted as continents changed latitude positions over time. The breakup process also influenced chemical processes in oceans. As new ocean basins formed, seawater interacted with newly exposed rock surfaces. This interaction affected the composition of ocean water over time. The formation of new seafloor material contributed minerals into ocean systems which influenced marine chemical balance. In rift zones, geothermal activity continued to release heat and gases from deeper layers of Earth. These processes contributed to changes in local environments around spreading centers. Hydrothermal systems formed where hot fluids circulated through newly formed crust, affecting chemical conditions in ocean water near these regions. As continents continued to separate, sedimentary basins became widespread along continental margins. These basins collected material from erosion of nearby land surfaces. Over long periods, thick sequences of sediment accumulated. These sequences preserved records of environmental changes during different stages of continental movement. The shifting of landmasses also influenced the formation of shallow seas along continental edges. These shallow seas expanded and contracted as sea levels and land positions changed. Marine environments in these regions supported a wide range of organisms adapted to varying conditions. The breakup of Pangea continued through successive geological periods, with ongoing movement of tectonic plates shaping the arrangement of continents and ocean basins. The surface of Earth remained in continuous motion, with new land and sea configurations forming across extended spans of geological time, and these processes carried forward into later stages of Earth's development. The end of the Triassic period and the beginning of the Jurassic period was marked by a major global change in life on Earth known as the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event. This event happened about 201,300,000 years ago, and it changed life in the oceans and on land in a wide and lasting way. It was one of the major mass extinction events in Earth history, where a large number of living groups disappeared within a relatively short span of geological time. The changes that took place affected animals, plants, and many small and large forms of life that existed at that time. During the late part of the Triassic period, Earth already held a wide range of living organisms. Oceans contained many types of marine reptiles, shell-bearing animals, corals, and early forms of fish. On land, there were early dinosaurs, large amphibians, crocodile relatives, and many kinds of seed plants. The climate was generally warm in many regions, and large land areas were joined together in one supercontinent. These conditions allowed life to spread widely across land areas without large ocean barriers. As time moved toward the end of the Triassic period, environmental conditions began to change in ways that affected living systems across the planet. One of the major factors linked to these changes was large volcanic activity that took place in what is now the region of the eastern part of North America and nearby ocean areas. This volcanic activity formed the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. The eruptions released large amounts of gases into the atmosphere, including carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds. These gases influenced the air, oceans, and climate over long periods of time. The increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere caused changes in global temperature patterns. The warming of the planet influenced rainfall patterns, soil conditions, and water systems. Changes in temperature also affected how oxygen and carbon moved through the oceans and atmosphere. When large amounts of gases entered the air over long periods, the balance of natural systems was disturbed in ways that affected living organisms at many levels. In the oceans, one of the major effects involved the reduction of oxygen in deeper waters. Many marine organisms depend on oxygen dissolved in seawater. When oxygen levels dropped, certain environments became difficult for many species to survive in. This condition affected organisms such as ammonoids, bivalves, and some types of marine reptiles. Some groups experienced large reductions in population size, and others disappeared entirely from many regions. Ocean chemistry also changed during this time. Increased carbon dioxide caused seawater to become more acidic. This change in acidity affected organisms that built shells or skeletons from calcium carbonate. Coral systems were strongly affected because coral organisms depend on stable conditions for growth and reef formation. Many reef systems that existed during the late Triassic period were reduced or disappeared during this interval. After the event, reef systems took a long time to recover and rebuild. On land, plant life also experienced changes. Forests that existed during the late Triassic period included different types of seed plants and early forms of vegetation that covered large areas of land. As climate and atmospheric conditions shifted, some plant groups declined. In some regions, plant communities became less diverse. This change in plant life affected the animals that depended on them for food and shelter. Among land animals, many reptile groups that had been common during the Triassic period disappeared during the extinction interval. Large amphibians that lived in freshwater systems were affected in many regions. Crocodile relatives that were diverse during the Triassic period also experienced major reductions. Many early reptile lineages that did not survive into the Jurassic period disappeared completely. Dinosaurs were present during the late Triassic period, but they were not yet the dominant land animals in most ecosystems. After the extinction event, many competing animal groups were reduced, and this created new ecological conditions. Dinosaurs then expanded into a wider range of environments during the early Jurassic period. The changes in ecosystems allowed different dinosaur groups to become more widespread across land areas. The timing of the extinction event shows that it did not happen in a single moment. Instead, it occurred over a period of time that involved multiple phases of environmental stress. Some scientists describe several pulses of extinction activity. These pulses may have been connected to repeated volcanic eruptions and continuing changes in climate and ocean chemistry. Each phase added pressure on living systems that were already affected by earlier changes. In marine environments, ammonoids were one of the groups that experienced strong losses. These were shell-bearing organisms that lived in ocean waters and were widely distributed. Many ammonoid groups disappeared during this time, although some lineages survived and later diversified in the Jurassic period. Bivalves, which include clams and related organisms, also experienced shifts in diversity. Some species declined while others adapted to new conditions. Freshwater systems were also affected. Rivers and lakes experienced changes in temperature and chemical composition. Organisms living in these systems depended on stable oxygen levels and stable water chemistry. When conditions changed, some species were unable to survive in their original habitats. This led to changes in freshwater ecosystems across many regions. The volcanic activity that is strongly linked to this extinction event occurred in multiple phases. Lava flows covered large areas of land and released gases over extended periods. These gases included carbon dioxide, which remains in the atmosphere for long periods and influences global temperature. Sulfur compounds released during eruptions also affected the atmosphere by forming aerosols that influenced sunlight reaching the surface. These processes affected both land and ocean environments. As atmospheric composition changed, rainfall patterns were also affected. Some regions experienced increased rainfall, while others became drier. These shifts influenced soil formation and plant growth. Changes in vegetation then affected herbivorous animals, which depended on plant material for food. This chain of changes influenced many levels of ecosystems on land. In ocean systems, changes in temperature affected circulation patterns. Warmer water holds less oxygen than cooler water, which contributed to oxygen reduction in certain ocean regions. Reduced circulation can limit the movement of nutrients and oxygen through different layers of water. These conditions created stress for many marine organisms that depended on stable oxygen supply. During this time, the fossil record shows a reduction in biodiversity in many groups. Biodiversity refers to the variety of living organisms in a given environment. In the late Triassic period, many groups were present. But as the extinction event progressed, the number of species in many groups decreased. After the extinction interval, new patterns of diversity appeared in the early Jurassic period. Some plant groups that were affected included seed ferns and conifer relatives. These plants formed part of forest systems in many regions. Changes in temperature and atmospheric gases affected their growth and reproduction cycles. In some areas, plant communities became simpler in structure for a period of time after the extinction event. In marine ecosystems, the loss of reef-building organisms had long-term effects on habitat structure. Reef systems provide living space for many marine species. When reef systems decline, many organisms lose important environments for feeding and reproduction. After the extinction event, reef recovery took time and new reef-building organisms gradually became more common in later periods. The extinction event also influenced evolutionary pathways. When many species disappear, ecological spaces become available for other groups. Surviving organisms can expand into these spaces over time. This process affects the direction of evolution and the distribution of species across environments. After this extinction event, dinosaurs expanded into a wider range of ecological roles on land. Some insect groups were also affected by the changes. Insects are highly sensitive to changes in climate and vegetation because many depend on specific plant types or environmental conditions. Shifts in plant communities influenced insect populations. Some insect groups declined, while others adapted to new plant communities that developed after the extinction interval. The extinction interval also shows evidence of changes in carbon cycling on Earth. Carbon moves through the atmosphere, oceans, rocks, and living organisms. Volcanic emissions added large amounts of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. This carbon influenced global temperature and ocean chemistry. Over time, changes in carbon levels affected biological processes, such as photosynthesis in plants and respiration in animals. Geological evidence from rock layers shows changes in sediment composition during this time. Sediments record information about ancient environments, including temperature, water chemistry, and biological activity. Layers that formed during the extinction interval often show signs of environmental stress, such as changes in fossil content and chemical signatures. In some regions, signs of wildfires are also found in rock records from this time. Wildfires can occur when vegetation becomes dry and atmospheric conditions support ignition. These fires can affect plant communities and soil systems. The presence of fire evidence suggests that land environments experienced periods of stress during the extinction interval. The recovery after the extinction event took place over a long period of geological time. New ecosystems gradually formed as surviving species adapted and diversified. Early Jurassic ecosystems included new arrangements of marine and land organisms. Dinosaurs became more widespread on land, and marine life began to rebuild diversity in oceans. The transition from the Triassic period to the Jurassic period represents a major shift in Earth's biological and environmental systems. The extinction event acted as a boundary between two distinct phases of life history. Many groups that were present before the event did not continue afterward, while other groups expanded into new ecological roles. Some fossil evidence shows that certain small and adaptable species were more likely to survive the extinction interval. These species often had flexible diets or lived in environments that could withstand changing conditions. Survival during this time depended on many environmental factors, including location, habitat type, and biological flexibility. The study of this extinction event provides information about how life responds to large environmental changes. It shows how volcanic activity, atmospheric composition, ocean chemistry, and climate systems can interact over long periods of time. These interactions influence the distribution and survival of living organisms across the planet during this interval. The fossil record continues to show patterns of loss and recovery across different regions of the world. Some areas show more severe reductions in biodiversity, while others show partial survival of certain groups. These patterns reflect differences in environmental conditions across land and ocean regions during the extinction interval. The end of the Triassic period remains an important interval in Earth history because it marks a time when many biological systems were reorganized. The changes that occurred during the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event continue to be studied through geological records, fossil evidence, and chemical analysis of ancient rocks. The Jurassic period took place between about 201 million years ago and 145 million years ago. It was a long part of Earth history when living things on land, in water, and in the air went through major changes in form, number, and distribution. During this time, dinosaurs became the most visible large land animals across many regions of the planet, and their presence increased in many environments. The Earth at this time had different arrangements of land and sea, with large land areas still connected in some regions and slowly separating in others. The climate in many places was generally warm, and there were no polar ice caps as seen in later periods. This allowed plant life and animal life to extend across wide regions without strong seasonal freezing conditions in most areas. Plant life during the Jurassic period included many groups that had already appeared earlier. along with groups that became more widespread and more abundant. Ferns, cycads and conifer trees were important parts of vegetation in many regions. These plants grew in forests, open woodlands and river areas. Cycads had thick trunks and stiff leaves, and they grew in large numbers in many warm regions. Conifers formed tall tree groups that spread across large land areas and created continuous plant cover in many environments. Ferns grew in moist areas, especially near water sources and in shaded ground layers beneath taller plants. These plant types provided food for many herbivorous dinosaurs. Leaves, stems and soft plant parts were consumed in large amounts by many land animals, supporting large body sizes in herbivores and several ecosystems. The structure of land environments during this time included floodplains, river systems, forested areas, and dry inland regions. Rivers carried sediments across land surfaces, and seasonal rainfall in many areas supported plant growth in cycles. Some regions experienced long dry periods, followed by wetter periods, and plant life adapted to these changes. In many places, plant growth formed layered structures from ground plants to medium-height shrubs and tall tree groups. This layered plant structure provided living space and feeding areas for many types of animals, including insects, small reptiles, early mammals, and large dinosaurs. Dinosaurs during the Jurassic period were part of a wider group of reptiles that had already developed during earlier periods. They existed in many shapes and sizes, with different body structures adapted to different ways of feeding and movement. Some dinosaurs walked on 2 legs, while others moved on 4 legs. Some had long necks that allowed them to reach vegetation in higher or wider feeding areas. Others had strong jaws and teeth designed for processing plant material or for capturing animal prey. Their bones show evidence of growth patterns that indicate long lifespans in many cases, with steady development from younger stages to mature stages. Large plant-eating dinosaurs became especially common in many regions during this time. These dinosaurs often had long necks and long tails, with body structures that supported large mass and steady movement across land surfaces. Their teeth were shaped for stripping plant material from branches and ground-level vegetation. They likely spent large parts of their time feeding to meet energy needs due to their body size. Their digestive systems processed large quantities of plant material, which allowed them to maintain energy balance. Some of these dinosaurs moved through forested areas and open plant-covered regions, feeding on cycads, ferns, and conifer leaves. Other plant-eating dinosaurs had different feeding structures. Some had beak-like mouths that allowed them to cut plant material. Some had teeth arranged in rows that were replaced continuously throughout life, which allowed them to process tough plant material over long periods. These adaptations supported feeding in different plant environments, including low-growing vegetation and mid-level plant structures. In many fossil sites, evidence of feeding patterns shows repeated use of specific plant resources in certain regions. Carnivorous dinosaurs also existed during the Jurassic period. These animals fed on other animals, including smaller dinosaurs, reptiles, and other available prey. They had teeth shaped for gripping and cutting flesh, and their bodies were adapted for movement across land surfaces in search of food. Some had strong hind limbs that supported movement across long distances. Their forelimbs varied in size and function depending on species. Some had smaller forelimbs while relying on jaw strength for feeding, while others had more balanced limb proportions for grasping and movement. The interaction between plant-eating dinosaurs and meat-eating dinosaurs formed part of the overall structure of land ecosystems. Herbivores fed on plant material and carnivores fed on herbivores and other animals. This created a flow of energy through different levels of living systems. The availability of plant resources supported large herbivore populations, and the presence of herbivores supported carnivorous species. These relationships were present in many regions of the Jurassic world, although each region had its own local arrangement of species and environmental conditions. Small dinosaurs were also present during this time. These smaller species often had faster movement and lived in different ecological spaces compared to larger dinosaurs. Some fed on insects, small animals, or plant material, depending on their body structure and available food sources. Small dinosaurs likely lived in forests, undergrowth areas, and near water sources where food and shelter were available. Their smaller size allowed them to occupy spaces that were not used by larger animals in the same way. The air during the Jurassic period included flying reptiles known as pterosaurs. These animals were not dinosaurs, but were closely related reptile groups that developed the ability to fly. They had wings supported by elongated finger bones and a membrane stretched across the body structure. Pterosaurs had different sizes and feeding methods. Some fed on fish from water surfaces, using beak-like mouths to capture prey. Others may have fed on small land animals or insects. Their presence added another layer of animal life in the air above land and water environments. Insects during this time were also diverse and abundant. Many insect groups had already developed earlier, and during the Jurassic period they continued to diversify. Beetles, flies, early butterflies, or butterfly-like insects, and other groups lived in forests and near water sources. Insects played important roles in plant reproduction through pollination processes in some plant groups. They also served as food for small reptiles, small dinosaurs, and early mammals. Marine environments during the Jurassic period contained many types of life forms. Oceans and seas had reptiles adapted to aquatic life. These marine reptiles included groups with flippers and streamlined bodies that allowed movement through water. Some had long necks and small heads, while others had shorter necks and stronger jaws. These animals fed on fish, squid-like creatures, and other marine organisms. Their bodies were adapted for life in water, with limbs modified into paddle-like structures in many cases. Fish during this time were also widespread in oceans, lakes, and rivers. Many fish groups had already evolved earlier and continued to diversify. They occupied different ecological roles in aquatic systems, feeding on smaller organisms or plant material depending on species. Invertebrate marine life included ammonite groups, which had spiral-shaped shells and lived in large numbers in many ocean areas. These organisms were part of marine food systems and contributed to the structure of ocean life. Coral systems and other marine life structures formed habitats in shallow seas. These environments supported many species of marine animals. Sediment layers in these areas accumulated over long periods, preserving evidence of marine life in fossil form. The presence of marine reptiles, fish, and invertebrates shows that ocean systems during this time were active and diverse in biological activity. Early mammals were present during the Jurassic period as small land animals. These mammals were generally small in body size and lived in hidden or sheltered environments, such as underground burrows, dense vegetation, or nighttime activity periods. They fed on insects, small animals, and plant material depending on species. Mammals at this time did not occupy large ecological roles in most environments, but they were present across different land areas. Their fossils show early stages of mammalian development in terms of teeth structure and jaw movement. The continents during the Jurassic period were not in the same positions as in later Earth history. Large connected land areas still existed in some regions, while separation of land masses began in others. This movement of land affected climate patterns, ocean circulation, and the distribution of plants and animals. As land areas changed position, ecosystems shifted in response to new conditions. Some animal groups spread across wide areas of connected land, while others remained in isolated regions. Volcanic activity occurred in several regions during this time. Lava flows and volcanic deposits formed new rock layers in certain areas. These volcanic events influenced local environments by changing land surfaces and affecting air composition in nearby regions. Over long periods, volcanic deposits became part of geological formations that preserve evidence of Jurassic life. Sedimentary rocks formed in rivers, lakes, and seas also preserved fossils of plants and animals from this time. The fossil record from the Jurassic period includes bones, teeth, plant impressions, and trace evidence such as footprints. Dinosaur footprints preserved in sediment show movement across wet ground surfaces that later hardened into rock. Plant fossils show leaf shapes and structures from ancient forests. Marine fossils include shells, skeletons, and other remains of sea life. These preserved materials provide information about living systems during this time period. Different regions of the Earth during the Jurassic period had different ecological conditions. Some regions had dense vegetation with many plant-eating dinosaurs. Other regions had drier conditions with fewer plant resources and different animal distributions. River systems supported many ecosystems by providing water and nutrients to surrounding land. Lakes formed in certain regions and supported aquatic life and surrounding land life. The growth patterns of dinosaurs during the Jurassic period show stages from egg to juvenile to adult. Dinosaur eggs were laid in nests or deposited in suitable ground areas, depending on species. Juvenile dinosaurs grew through feeding and development over time. Growth rates varied among different species and were influenced by environmental conditions and food availability. Adult dinosaurs reached full body size after periods of continuous growth and development. Reproductive behavior among dinosaurs included nesting and egg protection in some species. Fossil evidence shows group nesting sites in certain regions where multiple eggs were found in close arrangement. This suggests that some dinosaurs returned to specific locations for reproduction. Eggshell structures show differences in thickness and composition among species, reflecting different reproductive strategies. The structure of dinosaur communities during the Jurassic period included multiple species living in the same regions with different feeding habits and movement patterns. Herbivores occupied feeding areas with plant resources, while carnivores occupied areas where prey animals were available. Smaller animals moved in ground-level environments and vegetation layers. This distribution of life created complex living systems across land surfaces. Weather patterns during the Jurassic period included rainfall cycles and temperature variations across regions. Many areas experienced warm conditions that supported plant growth. Seasonal changes affected water availability and plant distribution. River flooding events in some regions deposited sediment layers that later preserved fossils. Dry periods in other regions influenced plant survival and animal movement. The air composition during the Jurassic period included oxygen and carbon dioxide levels that supported plant growth and animal respiration. Plants absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen through natural processes. Animals used oxygen for energy production in their bodies. These processes maintained balance within living systems across land and water environments. Over time during the Jurassic period, dinosaur groups continued to develop new forms and expand into different ecological roles. Some groups developed specialized teeth, claws, or body structures that supported feeding in specific environments. Others adapted to movement across different land surfaces. These changes occurred over long periods through reproduction and survival of individuals with successful traits. Fossil discoveries from Jurassic rock layers across different continents show that dinosaur life was widespread in many regions. These fossils include remains of large plant-eating dinosaurs, carnivorous dinosaurs, flying reptiles, marine reptiles, and early mammals. Plant fossils show forest structures and vegetation types that supported land ecosystems. Marine fossils show active ocean systems with diverse life forms. The Earth systems during the Jurassic period included interactions between land, water, air, and living organisms. Rivers shaped land surfaces and transported sediments. Oceans influenced climate and supported marine life. Atmospheric conditions supported plant growth and animal respiration. Living organisms interacted with these systems through feeding, movement, growth, and reproduction. These interactions formed continuous cycles across long periods of time. The presence of dinosaurs in many environments during the Jurassic period reflects long-term biological development from earlier reptile groups. Their body structures, feeding methods, and movement patterns show adaptation to available environmental conditions. Different species occupied different ecological roles depending on their physical features and environmental availability of resources. Marine environments continued to support large reptile groups and diverse fish populations. Coastal regions provided feeding and breeding areas for many species. Ocean currents moved nutrients across water systems, supporting plankton and other small organisms that formed the base of marine food systems. These systems supported larger animals that fed on smaller marine life. In land environments, plant growth patterns influenced animal distribution. Areas with dense plant growth supported large herbivores, while areas with sparse vegetation supported different animal groups. Water sources such as rivers and lakes acted as centers of activity for many species. Animals often gathered near water for feeding and drinking needs. The Jurassic period also shows evidence of long-term ecological development across geological time. Fossil layers indicate repeated cycles of sediment deposition and biological activity. Each layer preserves information about organisms that lived during specific time intervals. These layers provide evidence of changes in living systems over long periods. Dinosaurs during this period occupied many ecological roles across land environments. Their presence in fossil records across different regions shows widespread distribution. Their remains appear in different types of sedimentary rock, including river deposits, lake beds, and coastal sediments. This indicates that they lived in a wide range of environmental conditions. The structure of ecosystems during the Jurassic period included multiple levels of living organisms interacting through feeding, growth, and reproduction. Plants formed the base of land systems, supporting herbivorous animals. Herbivores supported carnivorous animals. Decomposers such as fungi and bacteria broke down dead material and returned nutrients to the soil. These processes continued across time in many environments. The fossil evidence from this time period continues to provide information about the types of animals and plants that existed. Bone structures show body size and movement capabilities. Tooth structures show feeding habits. Plant fossils show leaf shapes and growth forms. Trace fossils show movement patterns across ancient surfaces. As Jurassic time progressed, dinosaur groups continued to occupy many ecological spaces across the planet. Their distribution across land areas, presence in different environments, and interaction with other life forms remained part of Earth systems that included land, water, air, and living organisms functioning together through long periods of natural processes. The Cretaceous period was a long division of Earth's history that took place during the later part of the Mesozoic Era. It began about 145 million years ago and ended about 66 million years ago. During this long span of time, Earth's surface, living organisms, oceans and atmosphere went through continuous and complex changes. Land masses moved slowly across the planet due to movements within Earth's crust. These movements caused the shapes and positions of continents to shift over time. Large ocean basins changed in size and depth. New seas formed in some regions while older seas changed their boundaries. The land experienced changes in elevation in many areas due to tectonic forces acting over long durations. At the beginning of this period, the arrangement of continents was not the same as it is in later times. Large land areas were still positioned closer together in certain regions. Over millions of years, these land areas gradually separated as tectonic plates moved. This movement occurred through slow motion of Earth's lithosphere, where plates carrying continents shifted due to heat-driven processes in the mantle. As these movements continued, ocean basins opened wider in some places and narrowed in others. New seaways formed between landmasses, allowing water to spread into low-lying regions of continents. Sea levels during this time were often very high. Large portions of continents were covered by shallow inland seas. These seas extended over flat areas of land, creating wide regions where marine conditions existed over continental crust. These shallow waters contained sediments carried from land and also materials formed within marine environments. The presence of these seas influenced climate patterns and allowed marine life to spread over large areas. Coastal regions were extensive and shorelines shifted frequently due to changes in sea level and land elevation. The climate during this period was generally warm across much of the planet. Polar regions did not contain large permanent ice sheets for most of this time. Temperature differences between equatorial regions and polar regions were less extreme than in later periods. Warm conditions extended into high latitudes, allowing vegetation to grow in regions that later became colder in other geological times. Atmospheric conditions contained higher levels of carbon dioxide than many later periods, which influenced heat retention within the atmosphere. Moisture circulated through the atmosphere and precipitation patterns changed over time due to shifting land and sea distribution. Volcanic activity occurred in several regions during this period. Large volumes of lava were released in some areas where tectonic activity was intense. These volcanic processes contributed gases and particles to the atmosphere. Over long periods, volcanic material altered landscapes by creating new rock formations and reshaping existing surfaces. Seafloor spreading occurred at mid-ocean ridges, where new crust formed as magma rose from beneath Earth's surface and solidified. This process continuously renewed parts of the ocean floor, while older sections moved away from ridge zones. The movement of continents influenced ocean circulation patterns. As land masses shifted, pathways for ocean currents changed. Water masses moved through newly formed seaways and around continental margins. These circulation changes affected temperature distribution in oceans and influenced nutrient movement within marine environments. Marine ecosystems developed in response to these changing conditions, with organisms adapting to different depths, temperatures, and nutrient levels. On land, plant life underwent significant transformation during this period. Early in the Cretaceous, Many land areas were covered by plants such as ferns, conifers, and cycads. As time progressed, a major development occurred with the emergence and spread of flowering plants. These plants produced flowers and seeds enclosed within protective structures. They began to appear in many regions and gradually expanded into different habitats. Their spread changed the composition of plant communities across continents. Forests became more diverse in structure and composition due to the increasing presence of flowering plant species alongside older plant groups. Flowering plants developed in many forms, including small herb-like plants, shrubs, and trees. They occupied different ecological spaces, including floodplains, coastal areas, and inland environments. Their reproductive structures allowed new interactions with insects and other animals. Pollen transfer between plants became influenced by organisms that moved between flowers. Seeds were distributed through wind, water, and animal activity. Over time, flowering plants became a major component of many ecosystems. Insects diversified during this period as well. Many insect groups expanded in number and variety. Different insects interacted with plants in various ways, including feeding on plant material, feeding on nectar, and using plants as shelter or breeding sites. Some insects developed relationships with flowering plants, where movement between flowers contributed to pollen transfer. These interactions increased the complexity of ecological systems on land. Insect life included beetles, flies, ants, bees, and many other groups, each occupying different ecological roles. Dinosaurs remain the dominant large land animals during this period. They occupied a wide range of environments across continents. Different groups of dinosaurs adapted to different diets and lifestyles. Herbivorous dinosaurs fed on plant material, including leaves, stems, and other plant parts. Carnivorous dinosaurs fed on other animals. These animals varied in body structure, feeding behavior, and movement patterns. Fossil evidence shows that dinosaurs existed in many regions, including forests, floodplains, and coastal areas. Some herbivorous dinosaurs developed large bodies and lived in groups. Others were smaller and moved through dense vegetation. Carnivorous dinosaurs included both small and large forms. Some were adapted for fast movement over land, while others had stronger body structures for capturing prey. Dinosaurs laid eggs and their young developed in nests or protected areas. Growth patterns varied among species, with some reaching large sizes over long periods of development. Marine environments during the Cretaceous contained a wide variety of organisms. Oceans hosted ammonites, which were shelled cephalopods that lived in many marine regions. These organisms had coiled shells and occupied different ecological roles within marine food systems. Other marine animals included fish of many types, marine reptiles, and microscopic organisms that formed the base of food chains. Marine reptiles included groups such as mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. These animals lived in ocean waters and occupied different feeding roles. Reef systems developed in warm, shallow seas. These reefs were formed by marine organisms that built structures over long periods. Coral organisms were present in many reef environments and contributed to the formation of complex underwater habitats. These environments supported many types of marine life, including fish, invertebrates, and reptiles. Sediments accumulated in marine basins, preserving remains of organisms and forming layers of rock over time. Flying reptiles, known as pterosaurs, continued to exist during this period. They occupied airspaces above land and water. Some pterosaurs had large wings supported by elongated structures. They used flight to move across large areas and access food resources. Birds also diversified during this period. Early bird forms evolved from earlier dinosaur lineages and developed flight capabilities. These birds occupied different ecological roles, including feeding on insects and small animals. Feather structures evolved in various forms and were used for flight, insulation, and display. Soils on land developed through interactions between rock, organic material, and climate conditions. Plant roots contributed to soil formation by breaking down rock material and adding organic content. Weathering processes affected rock surfaces, producing sediments that were transported by wind and water. Rivers carried sediments from higher areas to lower areas, depositing them in floodplains, deltas, and basins. These sediments accumulated over time and formed layers that recorded environmental changes. River systems changed their courses due to tectonic movements and variations in sea level. Floodplains expanded in some regions and contracted in others. Lakes formed in depressions where water collected. These freshwater environments supported various organisms, including fish, amphibians, and plants. Wetland areas developed in low-lying regions where water was present for extended periods. The atmosphere during this period contained gases that influenced temperature and weather patterns. Carbon dioxide levels remained higher than in later geological times. This contributed to overall warmth across many regions. Oxygen levels supported animal life on land and in water. Atmospheric circulation moved heat and moisture around the planet, creating rainfall in many regions. Seasonal patterns existed, but they were influenced by different continental positions and ocean distributions. As time progressed toward the later part of this period, changes continued in both land and marine environments. Continental movement brought land masses closer to positions that would later form modern arrangements. Sea levels experienced changes, with some regions becoming more exposed land, while others remained covered by shallow seas. Volcanic activity continued in certain regions, adding new rock formations and releasing gases into the atmosphere. Plant communities continued to evolve, with flowering plants becoming more widespread across many environments. Forest structures changed as different plant groups occupied available ecological spaces. Insects maintained their diverse presence and continued interactions with plant life. Dinosaurs remained widespread across continents, occupying land environments with varied ecological conditions. Marine ecosystems continued to host ammonites, fish, marine reptiles, and reef-building organisms in different ocean regions. Sedimentary processes continued to shape Earth's surface. Layers of sediment accumulated in basins, preserving biological and environmental records. Rivers transported materials across land, while ocean currents redistributed sediments along continental margins. Coastal environments shifted due to changes in sea level and tectonic activity. During the later stages of this period, environmental conditions continued to change gradually across the planet. Some regions experienced changes in temperature patterns and rainfall distribution due to shifting ocean currents and continental positions. Land areas continued to be shaped by erosion, deposition, and tectonic forces. Marine environments maintained active ecosystems with ongoing biological interactions among organisms in different layers of the ocean. Large volcanic provinces developed in certain regions where magma activity was extensive over long durations. These events contributed large quantities of lava flows and altered regional landscapes. Atmospheric composition was influenced by these processes through the release of gases and particles. Ocean chemistry also responded to inputs from volcanic activity and continental erosion. Life on Earth remained active in many forms across land, sea, and air. Organisms continued to occupy ecological spaces shaped by physical conditions of the planet. Plant life extended across continents in varied forms. Animal life adapted to available resources and environmental conditions. Ecosystems functioned through continuous interaction among organisms and their surroundings, with energy moving through food relationships and nutrient cycles across different environments. Pterosaurs were flying reptiles that lived during the long span of time known as the Mesozoic Era. They were part of the group of animals called reptiles, and they developed the ability to move through the air using wings that were supported by a strong structure of bones and membranes. Their presence is known from fossil remains that have been found in many parts of the world, preserved in rock layers that formed across millions of years. These animals existed for a very long time, beginning in the Triassic period, continuing through the Jurassic period, and extending into the Cretaceous period, before they disappeared near the end of that era. The earliest known pterosaurs appeared during the Triassic period, which began about 252 million years ago. During this time, the Earth was recovering from a major mass extinction that had removed many forms of life. The environment included large areas of dry land, shallow seas, and regions with changing climates. In these conditions, early pterosaurs developed body structures that allowed them to move through the air. Their bones were light in structure, with hollow spaces that reduced weight while still providing strength. Their forelimbs were modified so that one finger became greatly extended, supporting a wing membrane made of skin and other soft tissues. This membrane stretched from the long finger down along the body and attached near the hind limbs in many species. The body of a pterosaur included a head, neck, trunk, limbs, and tail. The skull in many species was large in relation to the rest of the body. Some species had long jaws filled with teeth, while others had reduced teeth or no teeth at all. The arrangement of teeth varied depending on feeding habits. Some teeth were sharp and pointed, while others were thin and closely spaced. The jaws could open and close with control that allowed different feeding actions. The neck supported the head and allowed movement in multiple directions. The trunk held the organs needed for survival, including lungs for breathing air and a heart for circulation. The wings of pterosaurs were supported by an elongated fourth finger on each hand. This finger extended outward and created a frame for the wing surface. The wing membrane contained skin, muscle fibers, blood vessels, and other soft tissues. In some species, additional structures called fibers helped strengthen the wing surface. These fibers ran within the membrane and provided support during movement through the air. The wings connected to the body in different ways, depending on the species. In many cases, the membrane attached along the side of the body and extended to the hind limb or ankle region. The hind limbs of pterosaurs were used for walking, climbing, and supporting the body when on land. The feet had toes that could grip surfaces. Some species had feet adapted for walking on flat ground, while others had features that allowed them to move on rocky or uneven surfaces. The tail in early forms of pterosaurs was long and provided balance during movement. In later forms, the tail became shorter in many species, and the structure of the body changed in ways that supported different modes of movement and flight control. The brain of a pterosaur was adapted for processing information related to movement, balance, and vision. Fossil evidence from skull structures suggests that the regions of the brain responsible for coordination and spatial awareness were well developed. The eyes were often large, suggesting reliance on vision for locating food and navigating the environment. The inner ear structure provided balance and helped control movement during flight. Breathing in pterosaurs involved lungs that allowed air to enter and exchange gases within the body. Air sacs may have been present in some species, extending into parts of the skeleton. These air-filled spaces helped reduce weight and supported breathing efficiency. The circulation system delivered oxygen to tissues throughout the body, supporting energy needs during movement. Feeding habits among pterosaurs varied widely. Some species fed on fish and other aquatic animals. These pterosaurs often lived near bodies of water, such as rivers, lakes, and coastal areas. Their jaws and teeth were adapted for catching and holding slippery prey. Some species used long jaws to skim near the water surface or to reach into shallow water. Other species fed on small land animals, insects, and plant material. Some had beak-like structures without teeth which allowed them to pick up food items from the ground or from vegetation. The development of flight in pterosaurs required coordination of skeletal structure, muscle strength, and wing control. The bones of the arms and fingers were light and strong. The shoulder joints allowed a wide range of motion. Muscles attached to the chest and upper limbs powered wing movement. The wing membrane adjusted during movement to control direction and stability. The ability to fly allowed pterosaurs to move through the air and reach different environments for feeding and other activities. Fossil evidence of pterosaurs has been found in many regions across the world, including areas that were once covered by ancient seas or land environments. The preservation of their remains occurred when their bodies were buried in sediment, which later hardened into rock. Some fossils preserve bones in detail, while others preserve impressions of soft tissues, such as wing membranes. These remains provide information about body structure, movement, and lifestyle. During the Jurassic period, which began about 201 million years ago, pterosaurs continued to develop new forms. Their diversity increased and many different body shapes appeared. Some species developed long wings supported by thin bones. Others had shorter wings with different structural features. The skull shapes also varied, with some having elongated snouts and others having broader heads. These variations reflect different feeding habits and movement styles. The environment during this time included large land areas, forests, rivers, and seas. Pterosaurs lived in many of these environments and adapted to different conditions. Some species spent time near coastal regions where they could find food in water. Others lived inland and used open spaces for movement. Their ability to fly allowed them to reach locations that were separated by physical barriers on the ground. Reproduction in pterosaurs involved laying eggs. Fossilized eggs attributed to pterosaurs have been found in some regions. These eggs had shells that allowed gas exchange while protecting the developing embryo inside. Evidence suggests that young pterosaurs were able to move soon after hatching. Their growth involved changes in bone structure, wing development, and body size over time. Juvenile individuals show differences in proportions when compared with adult forms. Growth in pterosaurs involved the development of bones and tissues over time. The bones started as small structures and expanded as the animal matured. The wing membrane developed along with the growth of the limbs and fingers. The skull changed shape as feeding habits developed. The process of growth required energy from food and support from the environment. During the Cretaceous period, which began about 145 million years ago, pterosaurs reached a wide range of forms. Some species developed very large wings supported by long bones and extended structures. Others had smaller wings and more compact bodies. The diversity of skull shapes increased, with some species having crests on their heads. These crests varied in shape and size and were made of bone covered by soft tissue. The skeletal structure of pterosaurs included hollow bones with internal support structures. These bones reduced weight while maintaining strength. The bones of the wings, skull, and limbs were connected by joints that allowed movement. The vertebral column supported the body and provided attachment points for muscles. The ribs protected internal organs and supported breathing movements. The skin of pterosaurs covered the body and wing surfaces. It formed the wing membrane and also covered other parts of the body. The skin may have contained hair-like structures in some species. These structures are preserved in certain fossils and suggest a covering that extended across parts of the body. The function of this covering may have involved protection and regulation of body conditions. Pterosaurs used their wings in controlled movements that allowed them to move through air. The motion involved raising and lowering the wings, along with adjustments in membrane tension. The joints in the wing allowed flexibility. The fingers supporting the wing provided structural support during movement. The muscles of the chest and shoulders provided power for wing motion. The head of a pterosaur often contained specialized structures. Some species had elongated snouts that extended forward. Others had crests that extended upward or backward from the skull. These structures varied in shape and size across different species. The function of these crests may have included visual display, balance, or other roles related to behavior. The sensory systems of pterosaurs included vision, hearing, and balance. The eyes were positioned to provide a wide field of view. The ears were located in positions that allowed detection of sound and movement. The inner ear contained structures that helped maintain balance during movement through air and on land. The extinction of pterosaurs occurred near the end of the Cretaceous period, about 66 million years ago. At that time, many forms of life on Earth disappeared. Pterosaurs were among the groups affected. Their fossil record ends at this point in geological history. The layers of rock above this boundary do not contain remains of these animals. The changes in environment during this time involve disruptions in climate, light levels, and ecosystems. Before this extinction event, pterosaurs occupied many ecological roles. Some species were active during the day, while others may have been active at different times. Their feeding habits included catching animals in water, picking food from land, and consuming various organic materials. Their movement through the air allowed them access to food sources in different locations. The study of pterosaur fossils involves examining bones, impressions, and other preserved remains. Paleontologists analyze skull shapes, wing structures, and bone arrangements to understand how these animals lived. Fossils are often found in sedimentary rocks that formed in ancient environments such as riverbeds, lakes, and coastal regions. The condition of fossils depends on how quickly the remains were buried and the conditions of preservation. Some pterosaur fossils preserve impressions of wing membranes that show internal structures. These impressions reveal patterns of fibers and tissues that supported the wing. Other fossils preserve bone structures that show internal cavities and growth patterns. These features provide information about the development and structure of the animals. The classification of pterosaurs places them within the broader group of reptiles, although they form a distinct branch within that group. Their evolutionary history shows gradual changes in body structure over time. Early forms had long tails and certain skull features, while later forms showed different adaptations in wing structure, skull shape, and body proportions. The environment in which pterosaurs lived included changing land formations, shifting sea levels, and evolving ecosystems. These conditions influenced the development of different species. The ability to move through the air allowed pterosaurs to access resources across wide areas. Their presence is recorded in rock layers from many geological regions. The study of pterosaur movement involves understanding how their bones and muscles work together. The shoulder joint allowed rotation of the wing. The elbow and wrist joints provided additional movement control. The extended finger supported the wing membrane during motion. The coordination of these structures allowed controlled movement through air. The fossil record also shows variation in size among different species. Some pterosaurs had wingspans measured in small ranges, while others reached much larger spans. These measurements are based on fossilized bones and reconstructed skeletons. The variation reflects different ecological roles and movement patterns. The internal structure of pterosaur bones often contains air spaces connected to respiratory systems. These spaces reduced mass and may have supported breathing processes. The connection between bones and air spaces shows integration between skeletal and respiratory systems. The development of pterosaurs over millions of years involved gradual changes in anatomy and function. These changes are recorded in fossil layers that span long periods of geological time. Each layer contains remains that reflect the conditions of that period. The study of these layers provides information about the sequence of development. The head structures of some pterosaurs included elongated crests that extended from the skull. These crests varied in shape, sometimes forming smooth extensions or more complex structures. The presence of these features is recorded in fossil skulls and provides information about variation among species. The reproductive cycle of pterosaurs involved egg production and development of embryos within protective shells. The eggs were laid in environments that provided suitable conditions for development. The young emerged from the eggs and began independent movement. Growth continued through stages that involved changes in bone structure and wing development. The presence of pterosaurs in different environments shows adaptability to various conditions. They lived in regions with water sources, land areas, and mixed environments. Their fossils are found in locations that reflect these ancient settings. The preservation of their remains allows study of their anatomy and development across time. The structure of the wing membrane shows layers of tissue that supported movement through air. The attachment points along the body and limbs provided stability. The flexibility of the membrane allowed adjustment during movement. The combination of bones and soft tissues created a system for aerial movement. The skull structure in many pterosaurs shows openings that reduced weight and provided space for muscles. These openings are visible in fossil skulls and provide information about internal structure. The arrangement of bones in the skull supported feeding mechanisms and sensory functions. The tail structure in early forms provided balance during movement. In later forms, the reduction of tail length in many species changed body proportions. The vertebral column adapted to these changes, supporting different movement patterns. The final million years of the time when reptiles dominated land, sea, and air took place during the closing part of the Cretaceous period. This was a long stretch of Earth history when many reptile groups were still present, and many of them occupied a wide range of environments across the planet. The land was divided into large and small continents, and these landmasses were moving slowly because of deep Earth processes that continued over very long spans of time. Oceans covered large areas between continents, and shallow seas spread across parts of the continents. The climate remained generally warm in many regions, although local conditions differed from place to place, depending on latitude, ocean currents, and elevation. During this final part of the Cretaceous, ecosystems were already well developed. Many groups of flowering plants had spread widely across land. These plants included trees, shrubs, and smaller plants that produced flowers and seeds enclosed in protective structures. They were present in forests, river valleys, floodplains, and coastal regions. Gymnosperms, such as conifers and cycads, still remained widespread and formed large forested areas in many regions. Ferns continued to grow in moist environments and in shaded areas under taller vegetation. The presence of these plant groups supported a wide range of herbivorous animals that depended on leaves, seeds, and other plant materials. Herbivorous dinosaurs were still diverse during this final million years. Many of them belonged to groups that had evolved specialized teeth and jaws for processing plant material. Some of these dinosaurs had broad teeth arranged in rows that allowed continuous grinding of vegetation. Others had beak-like mouth structures that helped in cropping plant matter from low-growing or mid-height plants. Some large herbivores moved across floodplains and forest margins in search of food sources that changed with seasons and rainfall patterns. Smaller herbivorous dinosaurs also existed and often occupied more specific feeding areas, such as dense undergrowth or open plains. Carnivorous dinosaurs were also present during this time. These animals had adaptations for hunting or scavenging other animals. Their teeth were often sharp and curved, suitable for cutting through flesh. Some of them had strong hind limbs that supported fast movement over land surfaces. Others had more specialized body structures that allowed them to ambush prey or move quietly through vegetation. Their presence influenced the behavior and movement of herbivorous species, which often changed location in response to feeding pressure. Among the carnivorous dinosaurs, there were large forms that occupied top positions in food chains. One of the well-known groups from this time includes members such as Tyrannosaurus rex, which lived in parts of what is now North America during the final stages of the Cretaceous. These large predators had powerful jaws and strong teeth that allowed them to process large amounts of meat. Their activity patterns were influenced by the availability of prey, seasonal changes, and environmental conditions. Smaller carnivorous dinosaurs were also present and often moved in different ecological roles. Some of them hunted small vertebrates, insects, and other available animals. Others may have fed on eggs or carrion when the opportunity arose. Their distribution varied across regions depending on habitat conditions and competition with other predators. In the air, reptiles known as pterosaurs continued to exist during this final million years. These flying reptiles had wings supported by elongated fingers and membranes of skin. They occupied different ecological roles in the airspace above land and water. Some pterosaurs fed on fish and other aquatic animals by flying over seas, rivers, and lakes. Others fed on insects and small animals found on land. Their body sizes ranged from relatively small forms to very large forms that could cover wide distances during flight. The diversity of pterosaurs during this time was lower than in earlier parts of the Cretaceous, but they were still present in several regions. They nested in colonies in some areas, placing eggs in sheltered locations. Young individuals grew over time and developed the ability to fly after reaching a certain stage of development. Their survival depended on food availability and environmental stability. Marine environments during this final million years contained a wide range of reptile groups. Large marine reptiles occupied different parts of the ocean food systems. Among them were mosasaurs, which were powerful swimming reptiles that lived in warm and shallow seas. These animals had elongated bodies and tails that helped them move through water. They also had strong jaws that allowed them to capture fish, squid, and other marine animals. Some mosasaurs reached large body sizes and occupied top positions in marine food chains. Other marine reptiles included plesiosaurs, which had broad bodies and limbs modified into flippers. They moved through water using coordinated movements of their flippers. Some plesiosaurs had long necks, while others had shorter necks and larger heads. Their feeding habits varied depending on their body structure and jaw design. They occupied different marine environments, including open seas and coastal regions. Marine turtles were also present during this time. These reptiles moved between feeding areas and nesting sites. They fed on a variety of marine organisms, including plants, invertebrates, and small animals depending on species. Their presence added to the diversity of marine ecosystems during the final stages of the Cretaceous. In freshwater environments, rivers, lakes, and wetlands supported additional reptile groups. Crocodile relatives were widespread and occupied both freshwater and coastal habitats. These animals had elongated bodies, strong tails, and jaws adapted for catching prey in water or near water edges. They often remained near riverbanks or swampy areas where food sources were available. Some species were more aquatic, while others spent more time on land. The continents during this period were not fixed in their present positions. They were still moving due to long-term geological processes beneath the Earth's surface. This movement created changing coastlines, new shallow seas, and shifting land connections. Some regions experienced volcanic activity, which released gases and lava over long periods. One major volcanic region active during the later part of the Cretaceous was the area known as the Deccan region in what is now India. This volcanic activity produced large flows of lava that covered extensive areas over time and released gases into the atmosphere. The atmosphere during this final million years contained oxygen and carbon dioxide levels that supported large ecosystems. Temperature conditions were generally warm in many regions, and polar regions did not experience permanent ice sheets in the way seen in later times. Seasonal changes still occurred, and rainfall patterns varied across different regions. Some areas experienced wet conditions that supported dense vegetation, while other areas experienced drier conditions that supported more open plant growth. Insects during this period were abundant and occupied many ecological roles. They pollinated flowering plants, fed on plant tissues, and served as food for small vertebrates. Their diversity included flying forms, ground-dwelling forms, and aquatic forms. The interaction between insects and flowering plants contributed to widespread plant reproduction and distribution. Small mammals also existed during this time, although they remained relatively limited in size compared to many reptiles. These mammals lived in various environments, including forest floors, burrows, and areas near water sources. They fed on insects, small plants, and other available food sources. Their presence added additional complexity to ecosystems already occupied by reptiles and other animal groups. Reptile eggs were laid in many environments, including sandy areas, forest floors, and protected nesting sites. Egg-laying behavior varied among species, and nesting strategies were influenced by environmental conditions. Some reptiles guarded their nests, while others left eggs after laying them. The survival of offspring depended on temperature, moisture, and protection from predators. Food chains during this final million years were organized around plant production and animal consumption. Plants formed the base of energy flow through ecosystems. Herbivorous reptiles fed on plant material, and carnivorous reptiles fed on herbivores and other animals. Marine food systems included plankton, fish, and larger marine reptiles. Energy moved through these systems in many pathways, depending on habitat type and species interactions. Rivers transported sediments and nutrients from land to coastal areas, supporting productivity in wetlands and shallow marine environments. Floodplains expanded and contracted, depending on seasonal rainfall and river flow. Forests along rivers provided habitats for many species, including small reptiles, mammals, and insects. As this final million-year interval continued, Environmental changes occurred due to both slow geological processes and more rapid events. Volcanic activity released gases that influenced atmospheric conditions. Sea levels shifted in some regions due to changes in ocean basin structure and climate conditions. These changes affected habitats available to many organisms. In ocean systems, changes in temperature and chemistry influenced marine life distribution. Some marine reptiles adapted to different conditions by moving between regions or adjusting feeding behavior. Fish populations also shifted in response to environmental changes, affecting predators that depended on them. On land, changes in vegetation distribution influenced herbivorous dinosaur populations. Areas with dense vegetation supported larger populations of plant-eating species, while open areas supported different species adapted to those conditions. Carnivorous dinosaurs followed the distribution of herbivores and adjusted their movement patterns accordingly. Some regions experienced long-term environmental stress due to volcanic emissions and changing atmospheric conditions. These changes affected plant growth and food availability. In some ecosystems, gradual reduction in plant productivity influenced the number of herbivores that could be supported. This, in turn, influenced carnivorous species that depended on herbivores for food. During this final million-year period, the Earth's surface was also influenced by an external event that occurred at the very end of the Cretaceous. A large object from space entered the atmosphere and struck the surface in a region that is now part of the Yucatan Peninsula. This event released large amounts of energy into the surrounding area and affected global environmental conditions. Dust and material entered the atmosphere and influenced sunlight reaching the surface. This affected plant growth and disrupted food systems across land and sea.